Well, it's time for a little bit of golf. How's that? Hardly a weekend passes without the television having some golf tournament coverage. Men and women pushing that little white ball around acres and acres of green meadows and through the sandy dunes. But why? Well, for the glory and the finance of winning, of course. Somehow, I never feel too bad about the fellow who misses a putt. When the announcer says, "Oh, how sad! Oh, it just cost him $45,000 to miss that putt." Say, "Oh." Well, I might at first have sympathy until I find out that he'll get only $80,000 for second place instead of $125,000 for first prize. Yeah, well, that's the way it happens. See? Well, you've heard about, anyway, people who play golf, they have golf bags with them, don't they? Golf bags. I keep wondering if we have any golf gags. Well, there is the story, for example, of the golfer who goes to the course that he's never played before, never played that particular course. Oh, no, never played it before. And he puts the ball on the tee there at the first hole there. He puts the ball on the tee, he takes a practice swing, and then he makes his first swing, the official swing for the game that day. And he misses the golf ball completely. He gets set again. It's all ready, poses, and then swings again, and again he misses the golf ball completely. Now, what would he say at that point? I know what he said. He told all the others, "This is the toughest course I've ever played." So you see. Well, golf gives us all sorts of possibilities, of course, things we can do. There's no question about it, different ways. When I think of a story of the Christmas time discussion between two golfers. Yeah. One says to the other, "Have a good Christmas at your house." And the other golfer said, "Oh, yeah, I got a new set of irons for my wife." And the first golfer then, who knows the man very well, says, "Oh, that's terrific. What a great trade you'll have." So it happens. Well, then one more little golf story here. For this program, there's the story of the golfer who sliced his tee shot out to the highway. It hit a car on the windshield, causing it to smack into another car. And then it hit a tree. 3 people were seriously injured. Ambulances and police cars were on the scene. Everybody was screaming and so on. And, it was just a terrible thing. "Good heavens," said the golfer's partner. "Look what you did. What are you going to do about this?" You know what he said? "I think I'd better bring my thumb around a little more on the right of my grip." Ah! Yeah. Well, I had to try to make it funny anyway. Back with you next week. Well, we have sentences, not for going into jail, but sentences with subjects and predicates, maybe direct objects, maybe some other phrases. But the point is that we also can have some sentences that might be on occasion a bit remarkable. They can be serious, they can be philosophical gems, or they, of course, can be delightful twists of language as well. But what they have in common is that most sentences are remembered. That's right, or at least for a while, until they're put to good use. Sentence is the way that something is said, isn't it? Out of a whole mass of words that we have, some are put together in ways that draw us to them. Now, just for example, consider this. What the little boy said to his mother at the close of a church service. On other Sundays, he had been scolded by her for making noises, but this time he created no problems at all, and he knew it. With innocent facility of words, he got his mother's attention then, and he said, "Mama, Mama, Mama, did you hear me? Be quiet." I like that. It's beautiful, and it's poetic, really. People don't always hear quiet, but the point is a good one to be made, I think, just the way the little boy said it. Or, while we might consider a more deliberate use of words by Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said, quote, "A poet may eat bread for breakfast and bread and flesh for dinner, but for his supper He must eat stars only. That makes me ponder just what the stars are, not literally, but figuratively, of course. That's what counts. Oh, how about favorite sentences? I think it's wonderful to have a little, for example, one of the reporters in a newspaper in New York City some years ago put a twist in a sentence in a story about the weather forecast. This was just a little statement for the daily newspaper about the forecast for the weather coming up the next day. But this is what he said. I like this. Quote, tomorrow, snow, followed by little boys on sleds. I think that was pretty good. Well, there are all sorts of ways in which we can say things effectively. I'm thinking now of a memorable sentence by one of the very, very important young ladies who'd been asked to be married, I'm sure, many times at the time this came out. But she very appropriately came up with a sentence that I like very much. She said, marriage is a great institution, but I'm not ready yet for an institution. If you're going to use that word, you have to be careful how to come out of it. So it can happen. Henry David Thoreau said many years ago, our true character underlies all our words and actions. Yep. Our true character is what underlies all our words. They're there, and they should tie in with the words effectively. Well, put the words down effectively. Share your thoughts, your questions, your answers, whatever it might be. A friend of mine, Paul Williams, said great sentences will likely have the quality of private confessions. Yeah. Why? If it's a good sentence, it takes us by the shoulders and shakes us, just as a wholehearted friend might do with us. Well, keep that in mind. Back with you next week. We have thousands and thousands of words, of course, to deal with, and we can say almost anything just the way it should be, can't we? Well, dear friends, sometimes it's a very fragile line between good communication and some flubs. Yes, well, I think of some years ago a congressman announced one day, this is what he said, quote, what I want is a good plan for child abuse, end quote. Now, he didn't mean that he wanted to abuse children, no. We've got to have, in fact, he wanted a plan of how properly to deal with it, see. But he said, what I want is a good plan for child abuse, and that's how he can abuse all the children, is what it sounds like, doesn't it? I had somebody tell me recently he'd heard on the radio this announcement, quote, as soon as more information becomes available, we will have more information. Boy, that really made me glad that I tuned in, because that was very important. Well, there are other considerations, yes. How about this? This doesn't have much logic in it if we say things this way. Person who rushed into the depot, the bus depot, he says, has the next bus gone yet? The next bus gone yet? It's the next one. Well, so it does happen. Language is kind of a fragile device for us. We need it, and we need to understand it. There are times when the best literature uses a language in novel ways, unusual ways, to further underscore its fragile nature. That's right. You get ambiguity. You get a couple of devices here that shouldn't have been. Anyway, I think of something that Herman Melville has, fine author of many, many years ago, and one of his novels titled Billy Budd. It's the story of an innocent young sailor impressed into wartime duty. He earns the respect of the captain, but the disdain of the crew. They don't care for him. and the crew. Now, this is a fictional story, but there's a point I want to make here about phrasing. A plot is devised to implicate Billy Budd in an act of mutiny. He's totally innocent. But because of the wartime situation that this story deals with and the great concern of the captain for further revolt, yes, if action isn't taken, and Billy Budd, the title of the novel, is to be hanged. The noose is put over his head. Billy, in his last words, utters forgiveness of the captain, and the rope is pulled upward and the execution is completed. But Melville uses a key word in all of this. He really does. A word that's full of symbolism and ambiguity on purpose, and I'm sure it's on purpose, because Billy Budd is thought of as a fine person, a good person with good thought and so on. This is so terrible that just because he did one thing wrong, this innocent young soldier now, or sailor, is now going to, well, he's going to be put to death. The noose is put over his head. Billy, in his last words, utters forgiveness for the captain, and then the rope is pulled upward and the execution is completed. But what did Melville, how did he phrase it? What, that the rope was pulled upward? No, he didn't say that. He uses a key word that is full of symbolism and ambiguity. It is, really. What did they do then when they were hanged him? Now, this is what it says. As the final action takes place, it's a word full of symbolism and ambiguity, and here it is. Melville wrote, Billy ascended. Ascended. He went up, yes. It didn't say that he was pulled upward. It said that he ascended. It means the same thing. But there's a religious implication very readily brought into that, I think. And I know in many opportunities, this is the kind of thing that you discuss in a classroom situation. Is it meant that way? Was it meant that? Why such a verb? Well, language allows us to offer several dimensions of meaning. It's not a flub. Instead of saying, and Billy Budd's body was jerked upward, he said, Billy ascended. Basically the same thing. Well, that depends on the reader's awareness and reader's ability to discern the implications, yes. Art, for some, is clear, I know, and for some it's a bit confusing. Well, the use of language is an art, that's right. And, of course, that illustration. But the writer, Herman Melville, Billy ascended. Well, I would call that poetry. Not particular. Well, let us all be thinking about it. I mean, that's how we learn about those thousands of words in the language and when to use them and under what circumstances. Well, for another circumstance, I'll be back with you next week at this same time.